Gives to Mahaney on the right side. Aiden holds the ball high, left off the screen. Dribbles left wing, off the bounce, takes a three, and banks in! Oh my goodness! Guarded by Hickman, 7 to shoot. Mahaney, top of the key, downstairs to Saxon for the lay-in. The no-look dish for Aiden Mahaney. The Gaels have defeated Gonzaga in overtime, 78-70.
A very happy Monday to everybody, especially those amongst the St. Mary's faithful. It was a great weekend for the Gaels, not so great for the Zags. Welcome to the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about the St. Mary's Gonzaga matchup, which has warmed my heart to no other. It was a party in Moraga beforehand. It was a party in the building during, and it was a party in Moraga afterward. St. Mary's picks up a huge win against the Zags, are now in complete control of their own destiny for the WCC regular season title. We're going to get into all of that. We're also going to get into what happened around the rest of the league. As much as I was tweeting about how there was only one game on Saturday, there was a lot of action this week, and there's been a lot of movement, a lot of actually kind of not regressing to the mean, but everybody is now incredibly jumbled, maybe even more so than they were just a few days ago, a week ago, and we'll get into that. We're also going to have St. Mary's play-by-play guy Alex Jensen stop by. He's going to kind of go over that game against the Zags, review that one, and get it from his perspective about what we saw on Saturday and what it really means kind of going down the road as we look at not only the rest of WCC play, but also the WCC tournament, which is now less than a month away, but then also what this could mean for seeding in the NCAA tournament, not just for St. Mary's, but maybe also for the Zags. It's going to be fascinating just to see how this all breaks down over the next few weeks. There's only 3 weeks left of WCC play, so this is an exciting time to actually see how this is all going to break down, and we'll start to dive into all of that. But of course, we're going to start and talk a lot about Gonzaga St. Mary's on Saturday night. And we're going to start with some initial reactions that I had. And obviously, I was incredibly excited that St. Mary's won in the fashion that they won. And I think there were a number of things. I think we saw Gonzaga play very well out the gate. This was a Gonzaga team that really was crisp on the offensive end and then really played well defensively in that first half. They got up as many, I think it was by 11 or 12 on St. Mary's. They led by 8 at the half. And really it seemed that Gonzaga controlled the pace. Every time that St. Mary's looked like they might make a run, Gonzaga would have a defensive stop. Drew Timme was great in that first half. I believe he had 14. So we saw a lot of good things from Gonzaga in that first half. They really limited St. Mary's on the offensive end and also got St. Mary's in a lot of foul trouble. Now, I know that there was also I was fairly vocal about the officiating as many other St. Mary's people, as were Zag fans. No one was happy with the officiating in this game from either side. So, I mean, this is just something that we know that tends to happen. We've seen this happen a number of times in every sport, not just the WCC, not just in college basketball, but officiating did make an impact on this game. St. Mary's had 4 of their starters with 2 fouls at the half, and it really impacted. I mean, when you're taking Logan Johnson, Aiden Mahaney, Mitchell Saxon out because of foul trouble, it really is going to impact how this team is going to function, especially considering you have a lot of youth on that bench for St. Mary's. And on the flip side, I think one of the things I saw from Gonzaga, as we started going through that first half, was you were getting some pretty nice minutes out of Malachi Smith. You got a pretty good early performance from Julian Strother in that first half as well. It seemed that things were going the Zags' way, even though if you took a look up at the scoreboard, it was an 8-point game and they had scored 32 in the half, which really kind of tells me it's like, even though that was happening, this was still being played a little bit more at a St. Mary's pace, even though I do think that Gonzaga's defense did a fairly good job of trying to speed St. Mary's up from time to time in that half. But the way I looked at going into the half was that everything that could have gone wrong for St. Mary's did go wrong for St. Mary's. They were in early foul trouble all across the board. Their open shots were not going down. They were really struggling with the Gonzaga defense and had no answer for Drew Timme. This was just about as poorly as we've seen, not as poorly as we've seen St. Mary's play all year long, but it was a bit of kind of a gut punch to see that in the first half, especially in front of that crowd on the national stage and all that sort of stuff. But I felt actually fairly confident that, hey, being down 8 is achievable. Being down 8 is something that they can overcome because of how they play defense, and because they are so committed to playing their style and the way they do. And it's been successful, obviously, to this point, that they were going to wear Gonzaga down at some point, and the shots were going to start falling. And we got that little bit of a burst at the start of the second half. They got within 3, but then Gonzaga pushed it back to 8. And then for a good chunk of the half, we had this back and forth of going between 6 points, 8 points, 6 points, 8 points. And it really seemed like St. Mary's could not find that extra. They could not get the bucket to cut further into the lead. And then with about 7 minutes left, you lose Logan Johnson after he hits a really clutch 3. Like he did not have the greatest of nights. He did not have a great shooting night there in that first half. Again, like he was in foul trouble most of the night, eventually fouled out. And that was, again, another gut punch, and it seemed that Gonzaga was going to weather the storm again. And then it was Mahaney time. Then it became Aiden Mahaney, as I have now seen tweeted out. This kid has, every time I think that we've seen something so impressive out of a freshman, so composed out of a freshman, so poised out of someone who's still in their first full year at the college level, he does something else to just wow you and to be even that much more impressed by what he's capable of doing. He did not have a great shooting night. He was 1 for 8 from 3 on the night, but he started attacking the basket. He's found ways to get around a number of Gonzaga defenders. He found ways to get around Anton Watson. He found ways to get around Malachi Smith. He found ways to get around Nolan Hickman. He took over that game in the last 4 minutes. And I think it was like he scored 12 straight points. He had 16 of his 18 in a 5-minute stretch between the end of regulation and then overtime. He took one of the best teams in the country and just tore them apart at the guard position. Like, he attacked the basket, and some of the shots were just incredible shots. This is not to say that like Anton Watson, like especially like the couple possessions where he was stuck with him on the top of the key. I thought those were defended really well, and this was just Mahaney just with better offense than your defense. Like this kid is the type of kid. This is the type of player that is going to. This is that guy that wins you tournament games. We always talk like for the tournament, it's always about having that excellent guard play. That's what really wins in the tournament. Yes, you need the defense. Yes, you need solid play on the front court. But the make or break in the tournament is always the guards. And Aiden Mahaney, in 3 straight games, really, like think about back to BYU a week ago or 2 weeks ago now with the game winner there. He comes back here, hits the clutch, much needed 3 against USF to put that one out of reach. and then he takes over a game against the Zags. First time he's ever played against Gonzaga. This has just been, it was an incredible game, an incredible atmosphere. Just thinking about the way that ended, and how he dominated. And I'm trying to take a step back and think of it, because like Gonzaga really had no shot in that overtime period. It really seemed like what happened there in at the end of regulation just carried over, and Gonzaga really could not recover well enough. And yes, you could definitely point to where was Hunter Salas in those kind of waning minutes. Couldn't he have been the guy to pick up on Mahaney? Maybe he would have been that guy, but that didn't happen. And right now, St. Mary's now has a 2-game lead on Gonzaga for the WCC title. They are in the driver's seat. They have 5 conference games before they see Gonzaga again. So when they rematch against the Zags in Spokane, the conference title may already be done. It could already be wrapped by then. But of course, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the pod. It was just an incredible night. It's hard for me to kind of like to underestimate just the vibe that was in the building, the expectation. I think that was the other thing. The expectation was different from a year ago. Now, St. Mary's has beaten Gonzaga 2 straight times in that building, and each of them felt different. Last year, obviously, upsetting the number 1 team in the country, that was something that wasn't really expected, especially considering this was Chet Holmgren, Andrew Nebhard with Timmy and Strother. Like, that Gonzaga team was a juggernaut a year ago, and St. Mary's was able to knock them off. That was a true upset. This one, they obviously went in as the favorite. St. Mary's was supposed to win this game. They were supposed to go in and handle their business. And they did. It took them a while to kind of get going and everything else, but this says so much about the grit and the toughness of this team. Last year, the motto was gritty, not pretty. I mean, to an extent, that's always kind of be the description of this team. Like they are a gritty team. They don't do it in the most pretty of ways, but it is effective, and they get wins against incredibly talented teams. And that's what we saw on Saturday. So again, we'll get into the ramifications of what that means in a little bit. So I'm going to transition here, and I want to talk about the middle of the conference, because I feel like this is where we're going to start to see, at least a week ago, I thought we were going to start to see some separation between LMU, or like we're going to start to see some jockeying of clearly a team is going to be 3rd or 4th, or like someone's going to dip further down and be clearly the 9th or 8th team. That hasn't happened. In fact, it's almost no different from what it was a week ago, and now with 6 games to go, it's even tighter. LMU dropped 2 games, and yes, they had a big blow of that. Big reason I think that LMU struggled this week was they were without Rick Asanza. Like, the fact that you don't have your center, like it's very reminiscent almost of when USF last year would play without Yawan Masalski. Like, not to say that Asanza has had the season that Masalski had a year ago, but just his impact on the defensive end and the way he changes shots and everything else, I think has changed a bit for LMU, and they've dropped a couple. BYU, who was almost left for dead at one point. Again, we talked about how they've had 5 losses, and the 5 losses were by 21 points. Well, they won a couple games this week. They are now at 6-5. They're tied with LMU for 3rd. They're starting to look maybe the most consistent of this entire bunch right here in the middle. You have 3 through 9 that are separated by all of 2 games with 3 weeks to go. You're starting to think about, like, okay, like, what's this going to look like? Because if you take a look at the standings right now, it will be LMU and BYU who will get the 3-4 seed buys. After that, you're looking at it's going to be Pacific and Santa Clara, who are the two 5-5 teams. They're at 5 and 6, and then Portland, USF, San Diego, who are all at 4 and 7, will be playing in that opening round to get in to the actual tournament, along with Pepperdine, who finally won a game in the most inexplicable way. But Pepperdine finally won a game. You want to know how Pepperdine won? Like, I would suggest going back and watching the video of that last couple of seconds of the game. It's wild. Some elbows were thrown right as the clock expired, right before the clock expired in double overtime. There ended up being double technicals. And so both Pepperdine and Portland had to shoot free throws. Portland was going to win. They had a 1-point lead with like I think it's 0.6 left on the clock or something like that. Pepperdine then got the ball back because of the elbow, because of the flagrant. So like they got an inbound, and Javon Porter caught it at its peak and tipped that thing in. It's a wild finish. I go on YouTube, go on Twitter, find that clip. It's crazy. But Pepperdine is no longer a winless WCC team. They have gotten rid of the goose egg. They are off the schneid. However you want to describe it, Pepperdine has a win. But looking at this bunching of teams, LMU is 6 and 5. BYU is 6 and 5. Pacific is 5 and 5. Santa Clara 5 and 5. Portland 4 and 7. USF 4 and 7. USD 4 and 7. No one feels like they're going to separate. And like, to put this in perspective, we had 4 teams win 10 or more conference games a year ago. No one else outside of St. Mary's, who already has 10, and likely Gonzaga, who has 8, is going to win 10. Just by the numbers. Well, at least, like, I say that, like, I'm going on this realistic basis because both LMU and BYU, who have the 5 losses and have played the most games of that bunch, they've already played 11. They both have to play St. Mary's and Gonzaga again. And I don't see that going well for either of them. Obviously, I could be very wrong, especially for BYU. BYU had a close call with both of them. Obviously, LMU beat Gonzaga the first time around. I think Gonzaga is going to be much more prepared the next time around they see LMU. Of course, but that's going to be next week when they face each other down in LA. I don't see another team winning 10 games in WCC play this year. I think we're going to see a 9-win team be there in third place. I think we're going to see probably looking at 4 and 7 right now, we're going to see probably a couple of 6-win teams, maybe even a 7-win team stuck in that play-in round. It's so crazy just like how stuck together all of these teams are. Again, we can look at Pacific. Pacific, again, Pacific was supposed to finish in dead last, and they are at 5 and 5, and starting to take a peek at their schedules, who's actually probably best suited to make a run and maybe put themselves in the best position to get additional levels of the bye. And honestly, the two that actually maybe have the quote easiest schedule remaining is either Pacific or Portland. Both of them are done with Gonzaga, which is obviously a benefit for anyone. Both of them still have to play St. Mary's once. But outside of that, Pacific, actually, here's the thing. It's Pacific and Portland still have yet to play each other, and they're going to play each other this week on Thursday, and then they will play each other in the finale of WCC play in a few weeks. Pacific also has San Diego, USF, LMU. Portland has Santa Clara, USF, along with the Pacific, St. Mary's, and well, the two Pacific games in St. Mary's. So these two teams, I think, they have a greater opportunity to kind of like push through and actually get further up in the standings than maybe some of the others. Some of the others have not only they have both St. Mary's and Gonzaga left. Like San Diego has that scenario. USF, who has been so inconsistent, still has to go to Spokane, which they will this week, and they still have to go to Provo. Santa Clara, they still have to go to Provo. They are done with both St. Mary's and Gonzaga. But they've also kind of been struggling a little bit as of late, so we need to see Santa Clara start to pick it up a little bit as well. So again, like looking at all of this, like I feel like we're in for a really exciting next few weeks outside of just looking at what the top two are going to be doing. Like every one of these games is going to be critical for Vegas, and we can really start thinking about how this is all going to play out. Because again, like as the reminder for how the WCC tournament is structured, the 7 through 10 seeds will play in that opening play-in round, and then the two winners of that then finally go into the actual tournament. 5 and 6 get that first bye. They'll play the two winners from that opening round, the play-in round. 3, 4 have the next level of byes, which are autos into the quarterfinals, and then the 1 and 2 have autos into the semifinals. They won't play till the Monday of the tournament, which is always a long layoff, especially when you think about that means 1 and 2 seeds who will have last played a regular season game this year on February 25th won't play again until March 6th. It's a long layoff for these teams. And now Gonzaga did fill in that gap. They have a non-conference game. I believe it's on the Wednesday in between of that week against Chicago State. So they're getting at least like a tune-up in the middle of that long layoff. All right. So with that, we're going to transition back to talking about what the Gonzaga St. Mary's game means and how this is all going to play out. So again, St. Mary's is now 2 games up on Gonzaga in the standings. They are 10-0. Gonzaga is now 8-2. They do not play each other again until February 25th, the last day of the regular season. If St. Mary's wins out between now and the game before they see Gonzaga again, they will already be the regular season champion. There will be nothing that Gonzaga can do. And that game then becomes icing on the cake for St. Mary's. They can try to go in and play spoiler and really then it really becomes like a resume builder game. Like that's really what it comes down to, because the checkbox of regular season champion will already be done. And that's just something that we're going to have to kind of keep our eye on and see how that all plays out. What it also means is that St. Mary's got its signature win. It does seem that one of the biggest complaints about St. Mary's when it came to the tournament resume and where they were going to be seated, at least to this point, has been that, well, who have they played? Who have they beaten? Everyone points to the fact that, they beat San Diego State, but whatever. And then point to, you lost to Washington, you lost to New Mexico, which really, that's a Q2 game. That should not be one of the games you point to. But then Colorado State. Yes, admittingly, that is not a good look. So they were missing, the metrics all loved St. Mary's. They missed the marquee win, the signature win. And that's what Saturday satisfied. Saturday satisfied the marquee win. And now it's a matter of, for me, the way this plays out is that it also puts them in the driver's seat and in position to play closer to home for the tournament. The two closest locations being Denver, but then ideally, at least in my mind, ideally is Sacramento. It would be great if St. Mary's ended up playing in Sacramento. It would be the biggest opportunity for the largest number of St. Mary's alums and fans and students to actually attend. Portland was great last year as a location because it was a quick flight up, and I know a number of students actually hopped on a bus and drove up that the night before. So that would be a great opportunity, and the win on Saturday puts them in position for the regular season title, which again, checkbox. But I think the final checkbox, the one that almost secures that, is also being the tournament champion. That's what I think secures it. And crazy thing is, this may sound crazy as you look at where St. Mary's currently is in some of the predictions. 5-6 seeds is where, as of Sunday, is where a lot of people still had the Gaels. Again, I want to preface the fact that a lot of them haven't been updated since they played the Gonzaga game, so it's not like that adjustment has been made. It has not been made yet, at least at the time I'm recording this. If they beat with the win against Gonzaga on Saturday, and if they were to take at least one more against Gonzaga, and I think it has to be the tournament championship, then what you're looking at is potentially a 3 seed into the NCAA tournament. Again, like St. Mary's has still been a top 10 net team for the last month and a half. Like their metrics all say that that's where they should be. What they were missing is the resume to back it up. If they pick up another win against Gonzaga, I think that's going to satisfy that, especially if it comes in the form of regular season championship and tournament championship as the auto bid. For the Zags, this is unfamiliar territory for them. This is not a place that they're used to being. Being 2 back in the standings in the WCC to St. Mary's has to be one of the weirdest feelings for this program, the fans, students, alums, everybody. Like they are not used to being here, and they haven't been here in over a decade. And this is with maybe playing some of the best defense they've played all season long, and they did it for 35 minutes before Mahaney took over. And the offense looked really good in the first half. This was a game they should have had. This was a game that they had really won because they controlled the defensive pace most of the night. But they let it slip away. And we've seen that happen to Gonzaga already a couple of times this year. We've seen them with all their close calls, trying to coming back against Santa Clara, coming back against USF, playing up in Provo. It's like so many close calls. They got caught by LMU. They did not play particularly well against Pacific. I think what we're looking at is, and we've known this for a while, this Gonzaga team is not last year's team. This Gonzaga team is a much more flawed team than we have seen in a very long time. They do not have that consistent number 2. That still remained the case on Saturday. Drew Timme played a really good game, 23 points. He hit his free throws in clutch time. Like that was one of the things of like, he was not a terribly good free throw shooter, but he came through on Saturday on that front. Hickman and Bolton combined for 11, which is obviously not a great look for that pair, especially when you have a freshman drop 18 on you. But in the grand scheme of things, as it may seem like the sky is falling after that game, and you can point to this or that or whatever of what was wrong on Saturday, the grand scheme of things is that this does not impact Gonzaga all that much as far as their seeding or anything else. Like, this is still the same team that we expected to see. Remember, they were supposed to lose this game. There's not a huge surprise that comes out of this game outside of the fact that, okay, they let one slip away. This is still a team that has a great resume already to their name. This is a team that's going to be probably a 4 or a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. This is a team that honestly could probably do for playing with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder or playing angry. And I feel like that's something that they played with more fire on Saturday than I think we've seen in a lot of other games. And obviously it's the rivalry game, so that you kind of expect that to be there. But there should not be this overreaction to what happened to Gonzaga on Saturday. This is the Gonzaga we've seen most of the year. They just happen to play a team, and maybe this is the biggest position that they're not used to. This St. Mary's team might, and I will say it's like they are better than Gonzaga right now. This St. Mary's team is a better team than Gonzaga. They are playing better right now. They have a go-to guy that can close out games for them on a consistent basis. They play way better defense, light years better defense than Gonzaga does. And they've also been able to take care of business against the conference teams. And again, like we kind of pointed it out last week, just like how much more dominant St. Mary's had been against WCC teams than Gonzaga had been. And Gonzaga had played much better over the last week and a half or so. But the point remains the same. This Gonzaga team this isn't as talented of a team as it was a year ago. Again, like there were 2 NBA guys on the team a year ago. Those guys aren't here. And taking a look at someone like the mock drafts or everything else, like Strother and Timmy are late second rounders right now in some of the predictions I've seen. And we'll definitely get into a deeper conversation probably in the off season about their draft status and what we might expect from either of them on that front. But this is not as dynamic of a team as we saw a year ago. And so there shouldn't be this expectation that they're going to be as dynamic as they were a year ago, because they just aren't. This is a team that has to do everything right, do the little things right. I talked about it last week and said that the team who makes the fewest mistakes is probably going to win this game. St. Mary's won the turnover battle 11-8 or 8-11. And honestly, that's probably all it took. This game was going to be close. It was a 3.5 point spread when it opened. That's kind of what it felt like it was going to be, especially there at the end. And of course, yeah, it's like you're going to open it up a little bit because of late free throws or whatnot. But this was a close game throughout. It never felt like Gonzaga was going to run away. While they had opportunities to run away, they never did. And that was because of the St. Mary's defense, how poised they played. This is not a Gonzaga team that you should expect to actually be better than this St. Mary's team. Again, for Zags fans, that's incredibly unusual to hear, and it might be frustrating, but right now, that is the case. This St. Mary's team is better than Gonzaga. And we're going to get some perspective on this. We're going to dive into this, like go behind the mic on like the experience of what it was in that building and get some perspective on what this game does mean moving forward. So we'll go ahead and bring in Alex Jensen, and he'll walk us through all of that. All right, Alex, how's it going? And how have you recovered after Saturday night?
Man, what a night. What a night in Moraga on Saturday. Crowd was electric. It's going well though, man. It was a nice relaxing day yesterday, just kind of walking around the neighborhood with my fiance. I mean, just a few showers, but it was nice to be outside. after the rain on Saturday. And anyone that went to that game knows how hard it was raining when people were trying to come in. So, but yeah, what a night. It was another chapter to this rivalry, without a doubt.
I was actually out there trying to close up canopies as the deluge started coming down. So I was glad to get in the building to at least dry off a bit. But yeah, let's get into this game. And now that you've had kind of a day or so to process everything that happened, what's your impression of the game, the environment, and what this really looks like going forward?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, the environment in Moraga was just electric. I mean, for the second straight year, it's got to be one of the best environments I've been in that gym, since I started doing this 11 years ago. And the game was obviously an instant classic. First half, man, like the Gaels like dead in the water. I mean, it was shocking to look up at the scoreboard and say, oh my God, they're only down 8. They're only down 11. It felt like they were down like 15 or 16. But it's just a testament to the toughness of this team. A lot of teams would have folded in situations like that, and down the stretch losing, Logan and Saxon in overtime. But the game was, you don't want to say in hand, but certainly close to that. But I think that's what I'm going to remember the most, is just the toughness and the grit, the togetherness. They never broke. We've seen several teams break in that situation, and they kept guarding. Gonzaga's offense in the first 7 minutes looked ridiculous. I mean, just the ball movement, the shot making, the confidence. Randy Bennett said in the shoot around, they're going to play hard, like they always do, especially in Moraga and of course at home. But whenever the Gaels always get the Zags' best shot, and I think that's what makes this rivalry so great, is both teams get each other's best shot. But just the fact that how the game unraveled, right? St. Mary's did not play well at all for 32 minutes, and they'd be the first ones to tell you that, at least on offense. On defense, they were actually pretty darn good, and it started with that stretch to end the first half. I think Gonzaga missed 6 out of 7. Mm-hmm. To be down, like I said, to be down by only 8 at halftime was just kind of a credit to how tough and how good defensively this team is. To even have a chance to win that game, though, before Aiden Mahaney started doing what he did, is a testament to the leadership group, to the coaching staff, just the overall toughness and togetherness of the program.
And I think about that first half, because you're right. It's like it felt like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong in that first half offensively. Just nothing seemed to go their way. But Gonzaga could never really pull away, completely pull away in that first half. Which that was the one thing. At least going in, I was like, all right, they're only down by 8 at the half. This is actually probably a good position for them to be in based on everything that's already happened. Just kind of like think. What was your impression when we got to halftime? Was that kind of like similar to what you were thinking, or what was going through your head at half?
Yeah, it was kind of twofold. First of all, gosh, this is the fifth straight half where the Gaels have been, below their standard offensively. I think that was number one. And as we get to this point in league, Zach, as I'm sure you know, especially in conference play, these teams know each other so well that option A, option B, oftentimes option C is going to be kind of taken out. But I felt like the Gaels were much like the USF game. I felt like St. Mary's was generating good shots. They were getting open looks. They just weren't falling. They weren't shooting the ball well, which is rare for this team who came into the game shooting, almost 38% from three. They were shooting 46% from the floor. So it was just, that was my first thought was, man, this is the 5th straight. And it's easy to let your mind go there, right? When you're coming from a partisan standpoint,
sure.
But the other side of that was, man, this battle on that end of the floor, the Zags offense against the Gaels defense, which was kind of the marquee matchup that everyone was waiting to see coming into that game. If you look at Ken Palm, Gonzaga number 5 offensively, St. Mary's 4th defensively coming into the game. Outside of that 13-2 run early, you kind of had to feel like it was the Gaels defense that had the upper hand, especially over the last 12 minutes or so of that first half when Gonzaga, scored just 16 points. As I mentioned, the top scoring offense in the country in Gonzaga in terms of points per game. So I think it was twofold. They really had to defend well to be in this game, and they did. And B, again, the fifth straight half where really they haven't been up to standard offensively. But again, I mean, to have a chance to win that game after that half of basketball tells you something about how good this team is defensively and how tough they are.
And I mean, we could always kind of like point of like Logan Johnson did not have a good first half at all, like offensively. Like it seemed like he was almost lost to an extent there, but then he came through like in the clutch. Like he hit that huge three there in the second half before he eventually fouled out. And I keep thinking about how that this team then went without their best on-ball defender for the last 7 minutes of the game and into overtime, and they still somehow figured out a way to play good enough defense, well enough defense to pull this out. And you kind of talk about like that leadership, but also kind of spoke to the depth, because one of the things I think we've seen over the last couple of weeks is, and maybe you can speak to this, is just how good Augustas Marciulionis has been these last couple of weeks, this last month and a half.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with Goose. Last 5 games coming into tonight, or the other night, rather. I think it was, I have the number written down here, 13 assists, 2 turnovers. That's what they need him to do, is hang on to the ball, not turn it over. And you're seeing his confidence grow in the offense. He's so strong with that left hand, getting inside, going across the lane. And then you mentioned defensively. I mean, he's been so good defensively. He is a strong kid, man. He's 6'4", 195. He's got tree trunks for legs. And that's really where I was impressed by Goose, was on the defensive end, because he's been good offensively. And I think we know, Randy Bennett said after the Santa Clara game to Steve Kroner in the San Francisco Chronicle, we don't really have a weak spot defensively. We don't have any bad defenders. And for Augustas Marciulionis to play 24 minutes in that role and, be on the floor for the Gaels comeback, not slack defensively, score a couple of times, make his free throws. Yeah, you're right. Again, Zach, I think you hit the nail on the head. It underscores how much better he's gotten and how steady he's been over the last month and a half. And as a result, the Gaels have really kind of taken a step to the next level. And you mentioned Logan Johnson, and sure, 4-14. You mentioned he had the big three, but you look at Rasheer Bolton's line. I mean, Rasheer Bolton was 1 of 4 from the field, and Logan was the primary defender, and Rasheer Bolton fouled out. 1 of 4 from the line. He had 2 free throws, but 4 points, no assists. And that's where you feel Logan. Again, it's easy to look at the offensive end and look at his numbers offensively. And I heard that on a few podcasts leading up, from the other side, leading up to the game, talking about his numbers offensively. And sure, okay, you want to look at that, that's fine. But there's 2 sides to the court, man. And he is the heartbeat of this team. Kyle Bowen's the glue. I've said this on the broadcast before. KB's the glue. Logan's the heartbeat. And he set the tone by, essentially wiping out one of the Zags' top 3 options in Rasheer Bolton. And you do that, you got a chance to win despite as poor as the Gaels played offensively in the first. So that's really where I felt Logan. The 3 was huge, but I look at the box score after the game, Zach, that's where I feel him, is looking at Rasheer Bolton's 1 of 4 night and just 4 points.
Absolutely. And it does feel at times that, I think about it last year, because like Logan, if Chet Holmgren is not around, Logan's probably the defensive player of the year a year ago.
No question.
And obviously he's going to be in that conversation this year, although Kyle has been amazing on that end. So it's going to be a Gale who ends up with defensive player of the year in some way.
I agree. And just to touch on Kyle, I thought the Gaels made a really good decision down the stretch, because it's so hard to guard Drew Timme for the entire game. And Mitchell Saxon did a pretty good job for the most part, but they switched KB onto Timme for the last few minutes of the second half and overtime. And he forced some really tough shots, and that made a big difference in the game.
Yeah. Timme had a really solid game otherwise. Like, he had the 23 points. Like, he was a problem there in the first half and good chunk of the second half. But you're right. Like, that switch really did seem to just make it tougher on Timme. And I think that's all you really can do with that guy, is just try to make it as difficult as possible, because he's going to get his points. He's going to get his shots.
No question. And I think the where the Gaels were effective is, they didn't let player B necessarily beat them, right? We mentioned Rasheer Bolton and Julian Strother. Those are the Zags' top 3 options. Strother was 10 points on 11 shots. He turned it over 4 times. Malachi Smith had a nice game. I was actually pretty impressed by Malachi Smith. I think he may have earned a bigger role in the Zags rotation. But that's where that's where the Gales won this game. Is you're right, Drew Timmy's going to get his numbers. He's an All-American for a reason. But the Zags had 5 assists. I mean, they were just not able to get into what they do offensively for the most part. I mean, a team that averages 16 and a half assists per game, they had 5. And that's where the Gales defense has been so good this year. I think they're number 2 in the country in assists to field goals made if you look at the KenPom page. And, you don't let that Zags offense get rolling and let the ball get moving. I mean, the Zags, they really forced Gonzaga to beat them one-on-one. And, as you mentioned, Drew Timmy's going to get his numbers, but you don't allow the catch and shoot threes. You're going to see less of an impact from Julian Strother. You're going to see less of an impact from Rasheer Bolton. And 2 of those assists, by the way, came from Hunter Salas, who, that's not necessarily his game. So, again, it was the battle that we all expected. And in the end, it was the Gale defense that ended up with the upper hand.
Yeah. And we could probably talk all day long about this, how good this defense has been all year long. But the saving grace at the end, the one that's obviously made all the headlines, is it's Aiden Mahaney again. It seems like every night, especially the last few weeks, whether it be the game winner against BYU, the clutch 3 against USF, the last, 10 points, 12 points of regulation for St. Mary's. This kid just seems unflappable. Like, every time you try to think of a new way to describe him, it's getting hard to run out of these superlatives of how good he's been.
I was thinking about that yesterday, Zach, and you could, like you said, you could throw out all these different adjectives to describe Aiden Mahaney, but the one I keep coming back to is the kid's just a winner. I mean, he's just a winner. You mentioned the game-winning shot at BYU. He had the dagger 3 against USF after starting poorly. He was 1 for 10 through the first 34 minutes of that game. Last 6:26, I just saw this stat this morning. Our final 6:25 plus overtime, 16 points, 3 assists, 8 of 9 shooting. The difficulty of some of the shots he made down the stretch in regulation when he had the 10 straight points. Mark Few said it after the game, right? We tried everything. We tried to switch everybody on him. And a notable mission there is Hunter Salas, who didn't get a chance to guard Mahaney one-on-one.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we see in Spokane, and that'll be interesting. But it was everything. Once he got that and one to go down to make it 51-46, tough finishes with the offhand. He was able to get to his spots. Runners with the right hand. He picked up his dribble at one point on the lane line on the left side, used footwork to lean in, get around Malachi Smith and get to the rim. I mean, he's just a winner, man. I mean, he's at his best when his team needs it most. And it wasn't just the scoring either. And that's kind of the next step for his game to take, I think, is becoming that consistent playmaker. But, the game time bucket with 5 seconds left, that was a dime to Mitchell Saxon across the paint. And to Mitch's credit, and Mitch was a beast too. We haven't talked about Mitchell Saxon, but 15 points, 11 rebounds in that game. I mean, he was a monster. But for Mitch to make that catch, it was probably about knee high, a little bounce pass across the lane. And Anton Watson almost got there to deflect it. It was the perfect pass in that situation. When 2 Zags run at him, he's able to find Saxon across the lane. Then it was the assist to Dukas to start overtime, and then the no-look dime to Saxon to make it at that point. Must have wrote the wrong number on my score sheet. But the no-look dime to Saxon rolling down the lane from the right wing. So he did it in every single way. And that's the word I keep coming back to, Zach. You can go clutch, you can go moxie. They all apply. But the word that I keep coming back to is he is just a winner. And he makes the plays when his team needs it the most.
And now this team is in position. They're 2 games up on the Zags in the standings. They now they really truly control their own destiny for the regular season title. It'd be their first regular season title that they would share, that they would hold on their own since 2012. And we've seen some really good St. Mary's teams that have just not been able to kind of close that deal or been able to kind of get to this level. Obviously, Gonzaga in that time has also gone to a different level, and that's obviously been part of the challenge. But kind of speak what this is going to mean if St. Mary's is able to close the deal and get their first regular season title in over a decade.
Yeah, obviously there's a long way to go, right?
Right.
And this week is going to be a tough one. At LMU, at Portland. I can't remember, Zach, a week where, and I know Gonzaga, I was talking to Tom Hudson about this after the game. the voice of Gonzaga on their radio broadcast, and he was talking about how tough their travel schedule's been in the WCC, and it's going to be that way anyway because Spokane is so far removed, or much more removed than the Bay Area. But I can't remember a travel schedule like this the Gales have had in the last few years in the WCC, where it's going to be at LMU and then get on the plane after that Thursday game against a pretty tough team, and then fly out all the way to Portland to take on the Pilots. So that's going to be it's going to be a tough week. So there's a long way to go. But you're right; they have the inside track, a 2-game lead with 6 to play, and I mean, I think that for this program, first of all, I think what matters most is what they're going to do in March,
Sure,
in the NCAA tournament. But there's no doubt that a WCC regular season title would make Randy Bennett pretty happy. I mean, it's just because Gonzaga, well, it's not just because, but mostly because of what Gonzaga has been and how they've controlled this league. And I think it's a validation for St. Mary's and how far they've come, over the last 2 decades or so to win a regular season title, if they're able to do it 10 years after they did for the only time since 2000 or 2001, whenever Pepperdine won their last regular season title. But for St. Mary's to be the only team in the last 20 years to do that, and if they're able to do it again, I think it would mean a lot to this program. I think they want both. I think they want the regular season and the tournament title, and they know that they're going to be judged upon what they do in March in the NCAA tournament. They would love to go to a Sweet 16, get to that second weekend. I think they're capable. It's going to depend on the matchups, but yeah. I mean, there's no doubt they would love a regular season title. There's a long way to go to get there. But to do that with a team like Gonzaga in your league, the resume that Gonzaga has, the talent that they have, if they're able to do that, that would say a lot about where this program is right now.
Talk about the obviously success in March is the ultimate goal. Like getting deeper into the tournament and everything else is really what this team is trying to do. And as far as like the seeding, because it did feel like we've seen a lot of like bracketologists put like St. Mary's at like a 5 or a 6, which is kind of like around where they've been. And obviously the net and all the metrics are say a completely different story, where they've been a top 10 team in a lot of metrics for almost the last 2 months, where it almost seemed like that they were waiting for that signature win. How do you think, or how have you had conversations about what you think the Gonzaga win on Saturday changes the minds of some of those predictions?
I think it validates it more than anything. You know what I mean? I don't know if maybe for some people who were down on the Gales, but really St. Mary's has been kind of a darling, if you will, of people saying, don't sleep on this team. And there have been some articles written over the last couple of weeks based on where the Gales are in Ken Pom in the net, and as you mentioned, the other metrics. But I think this win validates. The Gales were favored going into this game, and I was talking to Jack Ferris last week on his podcast, Sack and Jack. For the Gale, for this to really, the heat to be back on this rivalry, and for St. Mary's to kind of validate what it's done, and validate where they sit in the metrics, it's a game they kind of had to win because they were favored at home. They're ahead of the Zags in the WCC, as you mentioned. And you look at their resume, Zach, and you can poke holes in it. I mean, before Saturday, St. Mary's had only played 2 quad 1 games. They only had 1 quad 1 win. They had 2 quad 3 losses. I'm sure you've been over all of this on this very show. But it's a resume that is certainly worthy of an at-large bid, but is still not all the way complete. So, first of all, you get a quad 1 win at home. But if you lose if the Gales lost that game again, it's just another hole you could poke in their resume. 1-2 in quad 1 games. They lost to Gonzaga at home. They still have to go to the Kennel. So, if they lost that game in the Kennel too, then you're going into March with, or at least the conference tournament, with 1 quad 1 win. It's not a place that you really want to be. So I think more than anything, it kind of validates it. It validates where the Gales have been in Ken Pom all year. And to me, for the Gales to stay there, it's a game they had to win, and they did. And I just think it solidifies their resume to a certain extent. Having a second quad 1 win that's going to stay a quad 1 win, and having the opportunity with, in all likelihood, knock on wood, because I think we all want to see two more of those games, two more matchups against the top 15 team in the net. So I think Saturday validates them, and I think they have an opportunity to climb higher. So I think bracketology-wise, you're probably going to see them still right there around the 5-6 range. But now they have an opportunity to climb if they're able to keep this up. If they lost that game on Saturday, I think you would see them drop down to 7-8 in those bracketology those bracketology boards, and stay there until they had a chance to potentially to take on Gonzaga in Spokane, or for a third time.
All right, well, let's get out of here, Alex. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for chatting and reviewing this game. It was a hell of a Saturday night, and we'll see how the rest of the regular season goes. We'll be sure to catch up and have a good road trip.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, Zach. I love your show, and we'll see you down the road.
It's always great to talk to Alex and talk some St. Mary's basketball. I mean, it was a hell of a Saturday. It was a great night, great game, a great addition to the rivalry between Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I believe it's only the second time in the Randy Bennett era, and the first time since 2012 that these two have gone to overtime with each other. It was an amazing finish. Especially if you were just a pure sports fan, this was a hell of a game, and obviously this game leaves a sour taste in the mouths of a lot of Zag fans, just the way it happened and the fact that it was two St. Mary's and all of that. But here we are. We're moving on to the next week. We're starting to look forward a little bit. And for both these teams, you can't think about too much about this game because there's already challenges ahead. To Alex's point, there's still a long way to go, even for St. Mary's, even though, yes, they're in the driver's seat right now. Do have LMU in LA on Thursday, which is going to be a tough matchup. Again, this is still the same team that knocked off Gonzaga in the kennel, so this is still a dangerous team. St. Mary's did play them pretty well the first time around, but this is also going to be the second time around through the league for Aiden Mahaney. For a lot of the veterans who kind of know what's what, like, there's probably not going to be as difficult an adjustment, but I think we saw at least USF made some adjustments on how they played Mahaney early on, and it was a little bit more of a challenge for him in that first half against the Dons last week. But this kid just makes adjustments and he figures a way out. But as we're taking a look at the rest of the league and where we starting to see some tough matchups this week, we do have to highlight the fact that Gonzaga is going to see BYU on Saturday. This one's going to be up in Spokane, so this is going to be a much different game than the one we saw in Provo just a few weeks ago. Obviously, BYU lost that game by 1. Strother hits the clutch 3 there toward the end. And this BYU team is, I think, playing really good basketball right now. They've lost some really close games, but they have been competitive in every last one of their games. They were able to get a couple of wins this week. They took care of LMU. They were able to also then take care of their Saturday matchup. So this is a team that I think is in a better place than they were maybe a month and a half ago. This is a team that's playing a lot more connected than they were then. I think they finally have figured out some of their rotations. This is a team that I think is still pretty dangerous, even though like they're really now on the far outside of any postseason potential bid. They're not going to be. The likelihood of them being an NIT team is now very distant. I don't think that's even a conversation. Like they're closer to CBI territory, and it'll be interesting to see if BYU takes the invite to do that. But then looking around the rest of the league, yes, you have that matchup for BYU, which is going to be key. USF is going to be at Gonzaga on Thursday. So like the Zags are getting USF and BYU up at the kennel this week. And the Dons also played Gonzaga really well the last time they saw them. So this is, again, it's going to be another really interesting matchup to see how this goes. The Dons did not play well this week. They dropped a couple of games after it looked like they were going to finally get back into it and get into a rhythm, and that did not happen. and they were unable to. They pushed St. Mary's hard on Thursday. Like they had a chance for the upset in that one and just couldn't close it out. And then they see Santa Clara on Saturday, and that just did not go their way from the jump. For BYU, like this is an opportunity. They're going to be on the road for both of these games, but they should get Thursday. It's again at Pepperdine. Pepperdine, while they did pick up their first win, they have just been dreadful on the defensive end all season long. I expect BYU to be able to take advantage of that in a big way on Thursday. So again, the big matchup for this one is where you're looking at LMU hosting St. Mary's. LMU is also going to be heading to Santa Clara. I think that's another big matchup, especially when we talk about this jockeying for the standings and everything else. And then BYU at Gonzaga. This is going to be, I think that's the highlight of the week. I think that's the one you really have to focus on to see like where the Zags are right now. It's like they're going to rebound and actually be able to make up for the loss that they had on Saturday night, or are we going to see more of what we've seen maybe over the last couple months with the defensive lapses? Again, I thought they played really well on Saturday. I thought Gonzaga's defense was on point for about 35 minutes. I thought their offense was very solid for a good chunk of that game, despite having to play a really stout and stellar St. Mary's defense. And I'll just leave you with this. Like, while it looks a little clearer at the top, there is plenty to still look at. Like this, it's going to be absolute chaos between now and the end of the regular season. The next 3 weeks are just going to be wild. They're going to be crazy. And I think this makes it all the more exciting for when we get to Vegas in just a little less than a month. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Be sure to follow and like on your favorite streaming services. Share with your friends. Follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Posts by Zach. Until then, have a good week, and I will catch you later.